Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your consciousness transformation ascension guide, originator of Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift. So, this sort of came out of nowhere. It was such an interesting thing to come up in meditation the other day, but it had to do with talking about what healing truly is. Because, we talk about healing in one manner, and there's like this general consensus in terms of like our culture, what culture looks like. Because culturally, we talk about healing as being better, right? Being not sick. And, it's funny because Saraswati Avagnoni, my partner over in Ascended World, she and I have been working on a program called Immunity Consciousness, and we talk about what health really is and what it looks like. But it's interesting that this came up to be a topic for today because it is really important to look at what really is healing, because we think of simply health and healing as being not sick when it really it all depends on, it's actually even thinking about the idea of being not sick is relative to an individual, right? It all depends on what they've been through. It depends on what their particular journey is about. And so really, when we talk about healing, we talk about like alignment, and in consciousness, we talk about alignment, because anything that is not in alignment with our true self and our authenticity is simply it's what causes our unhealthiness, or it's um and so we have things that we consider unhealthy, right? And our physical sense, right? Our physical being, our mental well-being, our spiritual well-being, our there's five that we have. It's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and environmental. And environmental, I mean by relationships, right? Do you have healthy relationships? Do you have a healthy work environment? Do you have a healthy, integrated, balanced life? Because there's all of these things that we talk about in different contexts. So when someone comes to me for session work, for classes, to help to shift their life and their experience, which is part of what my crusade is, to help empower people to remember how to do that themselves. They a lot of times they'll start with, oh, I just want to heal. I'm ready to heal. And we talk about that in spiritual circles a lot. You see things like, oh, well, heal this and heal that. Well, interestingly enough, early on in this journey for me, when I started doing this, and I've been doing this now for, weirdly enough, 10 years professionally, which just hit me last month, because as of last month, it was 10 years. And I was like, wow, that went fast. But in in the whole aspect of doing all of this kind of work, what came to me early on is healing is an idea, right? And we don't really heal. Good morning, Doug. So we get to this place where we're in unease, right? And so we're told we're sick. We're told that if this is happening, it's illness and all that kind of stuff, and then we sort of become a victim to it. And that's a discussion for a completely different day. But when somebody comes for healing, what I tell them is, first of all, what is it, that you desire, right? Because it's like, okay, well, my body is sick, right? I have a autoimmune disease. I have a chronic illness. I have cancer. I have allergies. I have injuries that are painful, things like that. They also come to me for things like I have I've had my heart broken. I've had my soul broken. I've been depressed. I have been diagnosed with bipolar. Like I have things like that. So I have all different kinds of things, and then I have others that say, well, yeah, my life is just a mess. I'm just unhappy, whatever. So all of those are situations where people are coming in a way that they consider wanting to heal, right? And healing is what we feel like is like mending up and everything else. So it's also coming from this perspective of that we need to fix things, right? And that we're in lack of things. So as we work and exist more in consciousness, and live this shift in a different way, we shift to a place of saying, okay, so there is nothing to fix. There's nothing broken. The thing that is uneasy, right, is whatever it is that's unaligned with my authentic self. And so we look at things from a much bigger picture in terms of saying, okay, so if this is unaligned, right, if this is like uncomfortable, if this is diseased, if this is painful, what is the ego perceiving as a lack of, or something that I have not looked at, that I believe that I'm in lack of, that I've held as a belief that's caused me to manifest this in my reality. So when you go into quantum physics, and like I like talking a lot about quantum physics because there is no belief system about quantum physics, like so quantum physics is like they've proven it over and over again. It's how things are interconnected. There's a whole bunch of things about energy and consciousness and how our thoughts create our reality, and where the attention goes, the energy flows, and all that kind of stuff, right? So if you look up in quantum physics, it's like, yeah, when something is not flowing, right? It's when you have a friction or a block, or like it's sort of where you get this clump, right? So that also works in, like, if you look at things like thousands of years of practice of acupuncture, Chinese traditional Chinese medicine, all that kind of stuff is all about where the energy is flowing and where it's not flowing. And so, for example, like I know, like in acupuncture, if you have like chest issues, if you have bronchitis issues, if you have breathing issues, oh, which is interesting that just came up because I'm just thinking about the whole COVID thing. Huh. Huh. Interesting download there. That I would use this as an example. But the chest issues and stuff have to do with depression and loss, beliefs of loss, and things like that. And that's when we get things like bronchitis and pneumonia and stuff like that. So it's like, I have to look at that collectively, what that COVID thing would be. So, and so to clear all that out is not just to resolve the physical symptoms, but to clear out and work on and look at what it is that's causing the physical symptoms to begin with, right? So when we go into this place of healing, and that's what our mind says, because our ego on that endless journey of separation, identity, individuality, which is fine, but that's just the recognition of what it's there to do, is saying, okay, so what am I lacking? What do I do so that I get healthy, instead of what do I do so I release this disease, right? What do I do to release this discomfort? What do I do so that I don't have these things come up? So for example, when we get to a place, like there's somebody I've been talking to who got into a car accident not too long ago, right? And if we get into a car accident, that's a fairly serious car accident, then there's a big message somewhere in there that we've been ignoring on our personal journey, that our higher self or our expanded consciousness, however you want to call it, has been, or the universe or the quantum field has been trying to get to us to remember, and that we've been ignoring because it's either uncomfortable, it's uncomfortable, it's something I don't want to look at, it's something it's something I'm identifying with in my ego, which makes it even more challenging sometimes to let go of. So I hold on to it, and I'll say, no, I can hold on to this, and I'll suffer through and whatever. But then what happens is you start getting sick, you start getting in accidents, you start having injuries, and all kinds of stuff. And so it's funny because when I have somebody come to me that goes, oh, I got into a car accident, or I got into this and I broke my ankle, and I'm like, okay, so whoa, let's just put a stop sign right there and say, what is it that you're not looking at that you have to yell at yourself this loudly to hear? And it's not with any judgment. It's just how we do it. From the understanding of consciousness, and it's a matter of how loud. It's like when you whisper and whisper to somebody and they don't hear you, and or they don't listen to you, and you're whispering, and then you raise your voice a little bit, and then they still don't hear you, and they say what, or they just don't listen or whatever, and then you get louder and you get louder until you're yelling, right, to say, are you listening to me or what? Well, that's what our expanded consciousness does for us. And that's what we've planned so that we carry out, okay, I'm, part of the set of lessons I chose in this life are to do this, this, and this, or to accomplish this, this, and this. And it's like, oh, but to get here, I have to get past, this point. And I'm really comfortable here. The ego's like, I'm really identifying with it. It really sort of likes the attention it gets from it. I mean, there's so many things and all kind of stuff. And to say, okay, so when we have something that we consider a sickness, an illness, a disease, an injury, a handicap, anything like that. And that can even include things like age. It can include like aging because we've convinced ourselves we have to age. When physically, when we look at ourselves, they regenerate so often that we actually could be fairly eternal if we allowed ourselves to be. Well, we believed we're only supposed to be here a certain amount of time, that our bodies are supposed to age, that this is what we're supposed to do in the bigger scheme of things like that. But like there are things that we have decided to identify with because it makes us feel special. It makes us feel like we get attention, and when we get attention, we feel like we're valued or loved, and that comes from this. At the end of the day, it comes from lack of unconditional self-love, unworthiness within, because we feel like we're in lack through that separation identity that we've gone through that exploration in this part of our consciousness as it's embodied here. So I just went through an entire big, huge loop of stuff. But this is important to look at, because when we say I want to heal, right? Really what's underneath that, and this is the misperception that many have, is saying I'm ready to heal is not saying, like, to truly be ready to heal is not to just release the symptoms that you have right now. If we want to continue to call it healing, what we want to do is shift it to a place of recognizing that healing is actually going back into alignment with my authentic self, with who I am, with the flow of my divine self, or however you want to put it, or my optimal flow, so that I'm optimally functioning in this embodiment. Then it's important for us to get to the recognition that the sickness, the injuries, the whatever that we identify with, those are simply symptoms. They're not the cause. And so when we, like, say, even take medicine, right, as a tool to help us get better, then we are just masking why we got sick to begin with, because we'll just get sick again at another point in time if we continue to hold the beliefs that allowed us to get sick to begin with. And that's what we start to look at, and that's what we work on when we work in energy healing and quantum physics and all that kind of stuff. It has to do with getting to the core of the creation of the friction, of the unalignment, right? Because it's like, okay, you come into me and say, I have this, or I've been, and that's what I say. Like when somebody says, oh, I had this accident. Oh, okay. Wow. That's a pretty loud message. So what is it that you're not listening to? Have you asked what the message is so that you don't have to repeat this again? Because my understanding and how it tends to happen is, like I was saying, you start with a whisper, you get to a little louder, it gets a little louder to finally get to a shout. Well, then it has to be like a massively catalytic event for you to stop you in your tracks, get you off your feet. Like there are people I know who literally got hospitalized or whatever because they had these messages that they knew of things to change their direction in life, to do something else, or to look at something that forced them to address it, because when they were bedridden, they couldn't do anything else but look at it. So the thing is, yes, we have physical stuff to resolve within us. However, the real key is to resolve what's underneath energetically, the physical things that we manifest. So when we work with that, like, so, a lot of people say, well, what is energy healing? Is it, it's not. It's actually very concrete in terms of how we put our attention. Where we put our attention is what we create. And that's the quantum physics understandings, right? So you can look at it and understand it from whatever filter you want, but that's how it works. And so and I'll tell you, when I help someone get to a core of what it is that is causing them to manifest things like a disease or disease, illness, injury, bad relationships, and job choices and life choices and things happening to them in their life or whatever. When we get to that core thing and we shift it, it changes like that. And that's where we get what we call like miraculous healings and stuff like that, or instantaneous healings. That comes from like getting to it's like reaching into your heart and pulling it out and be like, okay, right? But it's reaching underneath everything and saying, okay, this is the core. This is the seed that's causing all of these other things to grow. And to pull out the seed and the roots of this will mean that none of this other stuff has to grow. So a lot of times people come in and they say, well, this is really what I want to work on. And in the course of discussion or guidance comes in, or guidance comes in from their expanded self that to me that says, yeah, and this is really important. And I'll say, well, and I'll just get this random question to ask and say, so what about this? And they usually look at me sort of weird because they're like, well, yeah, I do have something about that, but I really don't know what to talk. Like I wasn't wanting to focus on that. And I'm like, well, it must be related or else it wouldn't come up. So, or it naturally comes up to the level of conversation. So it's not just so people think, oh, is it like just counseling or whatever? In a way it is, but it's intuitive connection to the expanded self to say, where is the seed of the plant that's causing all this illness and destruction in your life so that we can just pull that out, pull that weed out, right? So that you have nice, clear space to grow in the place that you are optimally there to grow. So, migraines and like I've worked with people, including myself, and changed allergies, let go of those because allergies are irritations. And when you find the core of the irritation, or the set of irritations that cause the allergies, then you can shift the allergies and let them go. The beliefs that cause us to hold on to things like that are beliefs that cause us to manifest things, right? Even sometimes we say we have to get sick because it's a human condition. We have to age because it's a human condition. And actually, no, that's what we believe. And that's what that's what we've chosen to believe collectively, culturally, or whatever. And when we get to this place of saying, yeah, well, I understand that getting sick is a message to myself from my expanded consciousness that I am missing in other terms. And I commit to listening and paying attention to those messages before they get to the level where I have to make it an injury or sickness. I commit to that so that I don't get sick. And that's completely divorced from the idea that it has to be because, other people get sick. Oh, it's a virus, it's a cold, it's contagious or whatever. It has nothing to do with that. I have worked now for 10 years, and I can't tell you with thousands of people, right, and I've worked with them that have the flu. They have been so sick. And many have called and said, oh, well, I'm really sick. I don't think I should come and see you. And I'm like, you know what, come and see me because now's the time. It's an important time for you to come and see me because then we can get to the core of why it is you're allowing that sickness, right? And then we can change that. So then we can also shift it so that you let it go a lot easier instead of fighting it. Just let it flow through and go on its own way. And so that changes the course and the experience of what we call illness. And so I've also worked with others who have had what we call terminal illness, cancers and like Alzheimer's and stuff like that. And what the other thing is that's really important is we get scared about disease and injury and all that kind of stuff because we're afraid of death so much, right? And I've had that discussion about death here too. And on Monday's Ascended World with Sarah C. Gavagnoni, we've talked about that in so many different contexts. But death is not, the thing is for us to get to a place of death not being a punishment, believing that death isn't a punishment and that it's bad. And when we stop avoiding death and doing everything we can to fear it and avoid it, then we simply look at things for what they are, right? So, I've worked with people who are choosing this path of exiting, right? Transitioning out of the physical body. And can they change it? Absolutely. One of the best stories about that, if you haven't read about it already or seen it, is Anita Moorjani. And she has a book, Dying to Be Me. That's a great book. I didn't read the book, but I actually watched the interviews that the book came from of her experience of getting to like stage like 4B, shutting down cancer, her body shutting down, call the family, everybody's dying. And then she stepped out. She saw what caused everything, etherically, changed it all, came back and everything's fine. So, that's it really in a very tiny nutshell, but it's a great story. And it's really all along these lines of once we see the core of what causes everything, the interconnection of it, we can just pull that out and we can choose to come back, or we can choose to complete that set of lessons. Or this is my exit strategy, right? If this is my exit strategy to be done with this life and to graduate from it, then so be it. The key is to make sure that there's nothing underneath the experience that is going to make me come back and repeat it again and make it even more intense. So that's what I've worked with. I've worked with people with terminal illnesses who are will consider terminal, and said, okay, so what do you want to do? Do you want to change this? Do you want to get underneath it? Because a lot of times when we get sad and whatever, it's an egoic thing about, okay, I'm going to miss my loved ones and everything else, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's the realization, like once we realize we're always connected, and once we have these experiences that we know that people step out of their bodies, they're still they're still around us anyway, as I have for many years. You just realize, okay, it's just changing form, right? So when they do that, it's a matter of, yes, they can choose to resolve this, change it, and move on, no matter what we say culturally or the textbooks or whatever. We can change it. But even more important is to be at peace with it, to be at peace with why we created it, and then choose whether we're going to continue down the path of completing it or changing the direction. So, and I have seen situations that have changed on a dime, and I've also seen situations where the person's continued down that path and they've transitioned out, but in a much different place than where they started. So the thing is to really get to this place of a different perspective on really what we believe we need to heal, right? So then we say, oh, I need to heal because I was raped. I need to heal because I was, abused, right? I need to heal because this person broke my heart. And so what's even more important, what's the most important part, is that to transcend the judgment of what that particular situation caused and say, okay, so what is it, if I create my reality, and I do, right? Then having is evidence of wanting. And if having is evidence of wanting, then why would I put this in my reality? And when you stop judging it, because the pain and all that kind of stuff and the anger and everything else come from that judgment. When we transcend and say, okay, why would I put that in my path? Why would I have made the soul agreement to have that interaction with this individual, to have this injury, to have this handicap, to have whatever? Hi, Anne. Then we can say, okay, this is how it served me. Like, how does it serve me? How did it serve me? Like, I met with somebody once who had come down with, like, I guess the worst kind of leukemia. I guess there's several different kinds. And the prognosis was that he was, I guess, I don't know. I don't even remember what it was. This was probably 6 or 7 years ago. That he was going to be transitioning in not too long in the future. And so I went to his house. I did a session with him. And the first thing I asked him, I was guided to ask him, is, how does this serve you? With many people might think that's a harsh question, but it's not. There's no judging in it. It's, how does having this in your reality serve you? And every time I've asked somebody that, or been guided to ask somebody that, they will usually, once we get to that vibration where we can connect in that way without any judgment, they'll look at me and, like, this person, this man looked at me and he knew exactly why he got this. And he said, well, my kids are adults. They're all on their own. They all have their own lives. My wife and I have been sort of drifting apart. Life has sort of been boring. I miss my family. I miss being connected with them. And I said, so you chose this way to do it? And he's like, well, yeah, because it's brought everybody together, because everybody comes to see me and we hang out together and we do things together, and we hadn't done that before. And so, somebody might want to judge that, but it's like, okay, so you can change that, right? Or, like, if you have these beliefs, well, if I get better, it's just going to go back to the way it was and all kind of stuff, then you might just continue down that path. So it's just, there's a lot of different, and so, I worked with that individual, and they did transition, and part of it was to come to peace with, there were other things that came up, but there are things to come to peace with, and understanding and accepting, to say, okay, well, okay, that was a choice, and there are other choices, and then I can move on from that. I can change that or whatever. And then there's other stuff because leukemia is really about deep self, like a lot of leukemia things that are called like things where your body, like autoimmune stuff, right? Where your body's attacking itself. And I think leukemia, that's really what it's doing too, is so it's attacking itself, meaning there's deep self-loathing somewhere in there, right? I'm not worthy of the attention otherwise. I'm not worthy of all the stuff, but it's like even deeper. Like usually it's lifetimes of stuff. And so can we change it? Absolutely. But again, it's going to this place of saying, okay, let's pull out the weed that might be as deep as it is, so that that's blocking me from growing, that's making me decay and die out. Because when I pull out that weed, right, the thing that is not allowing me to expand my roots and grow and realize my potential, like realize it in my manifestation, then that's what there is to heal. But the healing is really just removing those things that are holding you back, removing those things that we allow ourselves to manifest because they're hiccups in what we believe we can do, what we believe we have to do, what we believe we have to take part in, what we believe, how we believe we need to learn a lesson or a set of lessons, what we need to prove to ourselves that we're love worthy, things like that. So there's a lot of stuff that's related to this. So it's like, okay, let me sum up all of my 2.5 hour. But that's where we come from. So when we start to look at things differently, right? So my goal is when I work with people that they get to a place where if something comes up in their reality that is unaligned, right? That causes sickness, that causes disease, that causes injury or a challenging interactions or a challenged relationship or a set of challenged relationships or issues, right, blockages in their day-to-day lives, then what is it that's causing it? What is it that's causing underneath it? Because what's the message you're trying to give to yourself to remind yourself that you believe that you're holding yourself in place with? Because once we change that and let it go, then we just become we allow ourselves to realize the infinite beings that we are. So the first step in all of that is to look at in your life, and so like, yeah, you can look at things like, the collective thing with the COVID, right? You can look at things with flus and colds and all kinds of stuff like that, where we talk about, oh, well, you're just going to get it and it's going to be contagious. And it's like, well, we allow it to be contagious because we allow it to be. Well, it's contagious because we allow it to be, or anything like that. And like I said, I mean, I've been around a lot of people with things considered highly contagious and never gotten sick. And it's not because I'm just lucky, well, because I am lucky, but it's because I choose to be. I choose to be healthy. I choose that's my centered space. And I have made that commitment to myself a long time ago. So I used to be super sensitive to so many things. And I was like, you know what? I don't need to manifest the stuff in my body anymore. I can simply get to a place where I pay attention to the messages. I commit myself to that shift so that if I ever do get to a place that I actually injure myself, that I actually get sick, then I'm like, whoa, what am I ignoring? Because even if it's mild, I'm like, what am I ignoring? Because obviously if I've made that commitment and I still created that, there's something there to look at. So it's a completely different way of resolving within ourselves, right? And coming to honesty within ourselves. And again, for that is to transcend beyond judgment and to simply look at it as a message and to say, okay, so how do I resolve this and what do I change? There is so much out there, like even with the placebo effect, right? What people call the placebo effect, and write things off because of the placebo effect. Well, the placebo effect is one of the most powerful proofs that we choose to heal ourselves with and without medicine or without some treatment in many ways. So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff around all that, quantum physics and all that kind of that shows all this. But anyway, to start with this week is for you to look at what is it that's causing me to hold this in my body if you have something that you believe you need to heal. What is it? So if you say, oh, well, I got my heart broken. Well, it's like, well, why would you give somebody your power, that power to break your heart? What is underneath that? Is it that you need to be loved from outside of you to prove to yourself that you're love worthy? So that would come to self-love and unworthiness. And then you can work on that. So, because when you start working on that, well, then all that stuff shifts and you come to resolution and gratitude. You come to like the big topic of the month, because Sarah C. Gavagnoni and I are doing the 28 Days of Forgiveness program on Ascended World, that it's like there are all these things that we hold in ourselves that we have all these judgments about. And when we start to resolve that, you can do apology, forgiveness, acceptance, embracing love and gratitude for the whole thing, to say, okay, I'm so grateful that I put that in my path, so that I can see this and now I can move on without it. I can move on free of that and have a much more expanded experience. So it's a whole big cycle. It's not even a line. It's definitely it's a cycle from apology, forgiveness, acceptance, embracing, love, and gratitude for the whole thing, and resolution in that, and completion. And as we do that more and more, we'll start to see these things pop up in our realities less and less. The injuries, the illnesses, the uncomfortable interactions and relationships and stuff like that. So take a look at that and start asking yourself, well, why is this here? Why is this here? Let me see why it's here in my reality. Why did I create this? What is it there to show me? And what is there for me to shift? And that's where you really get to that place of true healing, because that's really coming to a place of true alignment within yourself and flow, where there's no friction, there's nothing holding you up, there are no blockages and stuff like that. So that's it for this week. A little bit in a nutshell. Have a great one. This is Angela Coulter signing off with Living the Shift. See you next time.